Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another Roll20 review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the marketplace section of online role-playing website roll20.net. For this video, I'll be reviewing the D&D Adventurers League module, Escape from Elturgard. It's from Season 9, Episode 1, designed by Wizards of the Coast and adapted for Roll20. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons Andrew, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick R, Andy, Chris, Manuel, Basil, Nick C, and Travis. And Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos, Dave, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean A.K., Cert 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Aros, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, and Fatboy619. Thank you all very much for your support. So this is an Adventurers League module which follows certain rules. I believe Season 9 is the first series of Adventurers League modules to be adapted to Roll20, and as of right now, it looks like they've got most of them available. So for the purposes of this review, I'll just be reviewing the very first episode, which is Escape from Elturgard, but they are right now available through, I believe, episode 16, which covers pretty much most of a character's career, and Season 9 is covering the Descent into Avernus storyline, which is still one of the most recent storylines that we have. So, as you can see, each one of these is worth $4.99. Let's see what you get when you purchase one of these modules. You get the journal organized into 4 parts here on the side. 1 non-gridded overland map, which is, of course, of the Sword Coast. 2 5-foot battle maps with tokens and dynamic lighting in place. Dynamic lighting requires the subscription. We'll be looking at those maps in a moment. An alphabetized token page with all the relevant tokens already built. 8 monster sheets with linked tokens. 5 of them have separate player art handouts. 12 named NPC character sheets with linked tokens and player handouts. 12 player art handouts, which is usually just kind of environmental stuff. And 3 magic items. Now, that's a pretty good amount of content for a $5 module, and I'm frankly very, very impressed with what this has to offer. I think it serves as a really great introduction to Descent into Avernus. I remember one of my complaints with Descent into Avernus and a lot of Wizards of the Coast modules is how they don't necessarily start off very well. That's kind of a problem of level 1 in general being very poor when it comes to D&D, but I think this one does a pretty good job. Parts of it boil down to a fetch quest or series of fetch quests, but there's also a lot of really fun opportunities for players to do some really nice heroic moments, because a lot of high fantasy is about, fighting bad guys, delving into dungeons, getting loot, maybe not necessarily doing hero stuff. You're almost more like just a murder mercenary, versus like, a superhero theme where you're actually saving people and rescuing and saving the day and all that. And this one is more of the latter, which I think is really cool. The story, which is a much better way of starting off the Avernus storyline, is that you are right on the outskirts of Elturel. So the story of Descent into Avernus is this entire city gets pulled into Avernus, pulled into hell. And that starts off this big, why did that happen? And then we need to eventually go to hell and save this whole city. So it starts off with you as level 1, obviously episode 1, and your party doesn't have really a good reason for being there. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. But in part of the Adventurers League, it goes really quick through Act 1. Basically, you want to get going and try to do this whole thing in, ideally, a single session, although I believe single session is usually defined as about 4 hours. But I think it does a pretty good job because you start off right outside the outskirts of Elturel. You witness the actual city getting pulled under, and then you have to deal with the refugee crisis. So the way Descent into Avernus starts, which if you go back and watch my Roll20 review of Descent into Avernus, one of my complaints was that you start off in Baldur's Gate, and you deal with the refugees coming in from Elturel, and then a lot of the first act takes place in Baldur's Gate and uncovering a bunch of cult shit happening. But I thought even then a better method would be to put the players into that refugee caravan, have them witness or be from Elturel, and that puts way more personal stakes into the storyline. And that's exactly what this Adventurers League does. You start off, you see that happening, whether you're from there or not, you can, decide with your players, but then you have to help gather this caravan and basically get people out of this nearby situation, because literally the nearby city, it's like you're in a suburb basically, and you just watch this happen, and you don't want to be anywhere near this giant like crater that's left. So you got to help gather up these NPCs and then travel across the road to get to Baldur's Gate. Now, this one episode is just the gathering of the NPCs, and then part 2 is actually getting to Baldur's Gate, or episode 2. So even within that, we have 4 different parts, and I think it's a really effective introduction. We start off at level 1. You meet with the head person outside of this area, which is Dara, and she tells the players, I need you to rescue like this person, and this person. So automatically, to start off with, we have a non-linear structure, which is always really nice to see, because something I think a lot of Adventurers League modules suffer from as kind of a necessity is a linear structure, because you need to be able to contain the adventure within a certain time frame, which means you're very constrained on allowing the players to make their own choices and their own moves and going off the grid or off the page. So I get it, I totally do, but I think this is a good solution, which is you can actually do these things out of order. 2 of them involve combat encounters, and I think they're both very effective. And the other one involves a series of basically item fetches, and it's not very effective. But the way I would structure it is to do that one, part 2, first, or try to encourage. I mean, it's up to your players which one they want to do first, but I would subtly encourage the players to do that one first while they're level 1, because it really boils down to going to different places and doing a bunch of skill checks in order to grab the things. Basically, you need to get this poet, Billiam, which is a hilarious name, to join the caravan, and he requires a journal, and you have to collect a bunch of items for the journal, including paper, feathers, and ink, and they require going to different places around the area and gathering these things up. There's some wasps you have to avoid. There's a magical store that's got these traps in place. There's a freaking Pegasus you have to worry about, although you can kind of, it's not really meant to be a straight-up combat fight. It's meant to be more of a social role-playing encounter. But none of those have any maps. They don't necessarily need maps. Maybe it would have been nice to have some little bit, something visual to show the players during this entire part instead. We do get good player art handouts, I will say that. There's a whole section here that sums up all the nice player art handouts that you can give players, and I think they're really well done, especially for a module that's relatively short and basically just a one-shot. Like, every single one of these sections has its own player handout that you can expand and show the players. And they're really, really cool looking. I especially like the way looks like it's actually torn and on fire right here, which is pretty cool. So that part's nice. It's a shame we don't get any maps for part 2, but we do get maps for part 1 and part 3, which are the important combat encounters. So part 1, which I can show, let's see, I guess I'll show the token page here, which if you've seen any of my reviews or you've purchased any modules, you recognize what a Roll20 token page is, and that is just including all the tokens here. You can copy and paste, and it shows them as a nice visualization. You can take any of the tokens that are already here and just drag them onto the map if you want to use them, and they're automatically linked to the character sheets. You can shift double click, pops that up. The handouts are here, so you can show your players just the handout, which is very nice, and then there's the character sheet all ready to go, which is all very, very nice. Huge advantage to running any of this stuff in Roll20. One of the biggest advantages to this module in particular, and I don't know, I tried to look in the credits, and I'm not sure if this is something that Roll20 did or something that Wizards of the Coast did. I'm tempted to think Roll20 because the art style is different, but we get token art for each individual named NPC, and there are a dozen here, which is a huge advantage, because usually when you get NPCs that don't have any kind of art, they do this trick right here, Roll20 does, where you just have the name. And it kind of sucks for playing on a virtual tabletop, because you want to be able to just include, that's up to me as the DM, like, oh, well, I want to really have, faces for all these characters that the players are interacting with. Even though it's a relatively short, one-shot module, we're still dealing with named NPCs throughout the whole goal is to collect these villagers. You rescue them from different situations, or you're talking to them, or the very end is even a mini murder mystery, which is really cool. So it's really, really awesome that we got actual faces to go along with all of these characters. So I think that's a huge, huge plus, and I think the art is actually really fantastic. And they all are, some of them are commoners, some of them are actual more combatants. There's a scenario where you'll be needing the help of some of them for sure. So they're not all just commoners with tokens slapped on, with token art slapped on there. So I think that's a huge plus. I absolutely love having that. So the overland map here, Sword Coast. There's Elturgard section. Your job is to go along, get to Baldur's Gate, but you're not there yet. You're just all taking place in Elturgard. You almost don't even need the map here, but I assume this is a map we're going to be seeing throughout most of these episodes because this is the region that we take place in. But we almost don't even need this because the whole thing just takes place right next to Elturgard. And then part 1, this is what the maps look like. Dynamic lighting you can see right here. So everything's closed off. The doors are there. You can open and close the doors to your players, which is very nice. This case, this is a really creepy scenario where a bunch of cultists are sacrificing one of their own, and if they complete it, a spined devil pops out. This is why I would definitely want to do these ones, not the first one, because this is probably one of the harder combat encounters, and I would try to level up the players to 2 before they actually make it here, which is why I think doing part 2 first would be the better one. Again, the players can do part 1, part 2, and part 3 in any order. They can decide how they want to tackle, basically helping gather all these different people. Part 3 is a case where you get to rescue people and be all heroic and very superhero-y, which is very fun. There's an inn that is under attack by demons, and you have to choose during this scenario to either help the poor, unconscious husband who's in the barn, which is currently on fire with a bunch of horses running around, or the wife who is caught in the closet with a bunch of demons knocking on the door. It's it's almost like a Walking Dead scenario. Just really, really fun. The players can split their forces. There's rules about how many rounds he survives and different complications that happen in the barn. And then this is a combat encounter going on. It's just a really, really neat situation that's way more than just another combat encounter. There's a lot going on in here that I really appreciated. And this is a really good looking map. I think this is a really cool in map that frankly you could use for a lot of different purposes. So I thought that was really, really nice to have. You can see the dynamic lighting is in place for everything in here, which is very cool. And then the finale doesn't have a map, which is a bummer because, again, even though it's technically not... Well, there is a combat situation, I will say that. So I think we probably should have gotten a map for Part 4. Part 4 is really cool. You gather all of the... I mean, this inn really could have served as a climax, and they could have stopped it there and said, okay, you gather your party and venture forth, and then we stop episode 1 here, and we'll pick up episode 2 with getting to Baldur's Gate. But instead, there's another complication that happens once you've gathered everybody, you've got them in the caravan, and then the first or second night along the way, one of the people you saved is murdered, and it's a big murder mystery on how that happened. And it turns out one of the NPCs that you had met is actually a secret devil cultist undercover who's trying to kill other people, and poor Billiam apparently had a devil inside. There's this whole... It's not really necessarily resolved very well. It's supposed to tease future cult things happening, but the result is a really fun little murder mystery, and there's notes on interviewing everybody and getting information out. I was actually really surprised that this was interjected at the very end of this scenario, but I think it works very, very well, and it seems very fun, very rewarding, and just a very fun use of socialization and role-playing that does devolve into a combat encounter with the final person, although I don't think it's meant to be necessarily a big worrisome thing. It would have been nice to have a nice little caravan night map, though, and been able to go and talk to all these people just to kind of keep track. So I think that, again, if you're playing on Roll20, it helps to be able to move those tokens around these kind of areas. So that's something that I would probably try to add, because we also have all that awesome token art for all of the individual NPCs, so you could totally just place them all on a caravan map, which would be very effective, and then players could better keep track of, okay, who are we talking to, and we can put a face to all these different people. So I think it's really well done, even though, I always could have used more maps, but the maps we do get are very nice, and I think it's a really, really cool intro with a lot of nice amenities. I mean, we get handouts for all the creatures, separate handouts for all of the NPCs, a lot of good player art handouts. Just really thumbs up. So if this is the kind of quality we get for all of Season 9, I'd be very, very excited to provide this for players. I think it's absolutely well done. The one complaint I would probably give is it doesn't look like these are actually available as add-ons. It looks like they are only available as separate modules, which is an odd thing to do, because it would be super helpful to be able to just add on each of these to a single game rather than having to create a separate game for each one and then transfer the heroes over, especially because these are designed to be, very much like an episodic format where each one is, $5, and obviously we want to take the same characters. Ideally, into different ones. Although I get Adventurers League, you know, people can come and go for sure, but that would be a complaint of mine. In fact, speaking of that, let's go into my pros and cons for Adventurers League Season 9, Episode 1, Escape from Elturgard. Pros, non-linear structure. You can do Part 1, Part 2, Part 3 in any order. I would probably subtly recommend the players do Part 2 first, and then level them to 2, and then do Parts 1 and 3, and then once everybody's gathered, then you can unleash the murder mystery in Part 4, but I do like that it's non-linear. Pros, an excellent balance of combat, role-playing, and exploration. It follows those 3 pillars very, very well. Pros, token art for a dozen named NPCs. That's a huge plus because we're dealing with named NPCs for a lot of this. Even though most of them are not combatants, it's really cool that we got token art for them, which is why I would probably want to actually create that caravan map so you can show off that token art. Pros, I really love the mini murder mystery climax. That was really surprising to me. It's a shocker because you don't expect that to be included here. You know, you expect the gathering of the forces to be the end of it, and then you kind of include that as a final thing. And it's like, oh, by the way, the person, and it's a person you rescued is murdered, and then one of the other people that you had worked with to rescue people was the killer. So that adds a really cool personal stakes in the very small containment of a single like one shot, which is very effective. Cons. Too many fetch quests. In theory, the entire adventure is kind of a fetch quest where you're just going around gathering people, and then within one of those, Part 2, is a fetch quest within a fetch quest. It's literally, hey, I need you to gather this, this, and this. And that's really kind of lame. I don't like seeing that, especially when we already were having to go around and gather people. Now you have to go around and gather objects, so Part 2 just kind of sucks in that way. And then the cons, I may be wrong on this. Roll20 can correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't look like these are available as add-ons. They're only modules, and I think that's more of a pain in the butt. I really wish these were included as additional add-ons that you could add into a single game rather than having to make separate modules and transfer characters over. If I'm wrong about that, then obviously I will make an addendum. Final verdict: quality maps, plenty of handouts, and multiple heroic opportunities make Escape from Elturgard a fantastic introduction to the Avernus storyline. Thank you all for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.